Most people don't think of chicken as something nations fight over, but South Africa and the United States have been clashing over it for years. At the center of the conflict is one frustration South African farmers have repeated again and again. American chicken arrives too cheap, too subsidized, and too damaging for local producers to survive. So South Africa has spent years placing duties, limits, and health checks on U.S. imports to protect its own industry. It's a long, complicated fight, usually quiet, usually technical, and rarely noticed by the public. But in early 2025, everything changed. Suddenly, social media exploded with claims that South Africa had finally taken a bold step, blocking U.S. chicken and causing a $450 million hit to American exporters. Farmers celebrated, commentators cheered. But one thing was missing from the entire frenzy: any official confirmation at all. And that's where the real story begins. So, is this really true? Let's find out. Before the $450 million headlines, before the viral posts, and long before farmers started celebrating online, the truth is simple. South Africa and the United States have been fighting over chicken for decades. Not tanks, not oil, not technology, chicken. And while the product may look harmless, the economic impact behind it is anything but. The conflict began years ago when South African farmers noticed a pattern. Whenever U.S. chicken entered the market, local prices collapsed. The reason wasn't mysterious. The American poultry industry is one of the most heavily subsidized agricultural sectors in the world. U.S. producers sell chicken legs, wings, and dark meat at extremely low prices overseas because Americans prefer white meat. The leftover cuts are practically dumped into international markets, and Africa, especially South Africa, has become a prime target.
I am interested in ensuring that we are partnering with South Africans to grow employment and to grow opportunities in South Africa through technology transfer, through training opportunities, and through building a sustained partnership.
South African farmers couldn't compete. They pay higher feed costs, electricity bills, labor costs, transport costs, and security expenses. American exporters don't face these pressures. And when their subsidized chicken arrives, local products suddenly look expensive. Farmers lose contracts. Small producers shut down. Workers get laid off. Entire local supply chains feel the shock. To stop this collapse, the South African government stepped in, using the tools allowed under international trade rules: anti-dumping duties, to raise the price of U.S. chicken, import quotas, to limit how much enters, and strict sanitary regulations, especially during outbreaks of avian influenza. None of these were dramatic bans. None were sudden blows. They were slow, steady, legal ways of keeping the domestic industry alive. Over the years, the U.S. complained, South Africa defended itself, and the poultry dispute kept ticking quietly in the background of larger diplomatic conversations, until 2025. In early 2025, something unusual happened. A wave of online videos began spreading across South Africa, claiming that the government had blocked U.S. chicken imports entirely, dealing U.S. exporters a massive $450 million loss. These posts didn't come from officials. They didn't come from trade experts. They didn't come from government statements. They came from ordinary people reacting to bits of information, incomplete, out of context, or misinterpreted. But the rumor had perfect timing. Farmers were frustrated. Import checks were getting stricter. Health regulations were tightened again after bird flu concerns. U.S. shipments were facing delays, and poultry associations were loudly pushing the government to take decisive action. So when the rumor hit the internet, it didn't feel like fiction. It felt like confirmation of what many wanted to believe. Celebrations erupted. Commentators applauded a historic victory. And almost overnight, South Africa convinced itself that the government had finally taken a bold, aggressive step. But there was one strange detail. As the rumors spread across the country, neither government said a word to confirm it. Not a single official press release, not a single policy document, not a single announcement from Pretoria or Washington. And that silence created a new mystery. If the government didn't announce a ban, then what actually happened in early 2025? What happened in early 2025 was not a dramatic government ban, not a sudden political strike, and not the $450 million punch social media claimed. What happened was something far less visible, but far more familiar. the same old trade restrictions tightening at the same time, creating the perfect illusion of a ban. To understand this, you have to look at how South Africa controls poultry imports. Unlike a sweeping ban that gets announced publicly, most of South Africa's actions against U.S. chicken are technical and ongoing. Anti-dumping duties, import quotas, cold chain requirements, state-by-state sanitary approvals, and temporary suspensions during avian flu outbreaks. None of these makes headlines. None of them trends online. But when several of them occur simultaneously, the effect can feel dramatic even if the policy hasn't changed at all. That's what happened in 2025. First, anti-dumping duties were still in place, raising the price of U.S. chicken the moment it touched South African soil. These duties are designed to make subsidized U.S. poultry less competitive, and they work. Second, certain U.S. states were still restricted due to avian influenza concerns. South Africa doesn't allow poultry from regions dealing with bird flu, and the United States frequently faces outbreaks. These state-specific bans reduce the flow of imports without requiring a national ban. Third, quota allocations came under pressure, meaning fewer importers were able to secure the volumes they wanted. Finally, customs inspections and cold chain checks became stricter, which slowed down shipments and increased delays. None of these policies was new, none were dramatic, but together they created an environment where U.S. chicken imports appeared lower, slower, and more uncertain. Now mix these real conditions with something powerful: timing. Just as these restrictions were tightening, South African poultry associations were speaking louder than ever. They were warning of job losses. They were urging the government to stop unfair imports. They were calling for firm action against subsidized U.S. chicken. In that atmosphere, when a rumor surfaced claiming that South Africa had finally taken the big step and blocked U.S. poultry, people didn't question it. They accepted it instantly. The narrative spread because the ground was already prepared for it. And by the time trade experts stepped in to clarify that no official ban existed, the rumor had already become truth in the public mind. In fact, the silence from both governments, neither confirming nor formally denying the claim, made the story feel even more believable. When officials remain quiet, the gap fills with speculation. So the real story of early 2025 is this: there was no ban, only the same long-standing restrictions that had momentarily lined up to create the appearance of one. But that raises a deeper question. If the policies weren't new and the ban didn't exist, then why were South African farmers celebrating as they just won a battle they'd been fighting for decades? Why were farmers so eager to claim victory over something the government never officially announced? Farmers celebrated because, to them, the rumor represented the win they've been chasing for years, even if it wasn't officially real. Their reaction wasn't about what the government announced, it was about what the rumor symbolized. A moment where it finally felt like South Africa had taken their side without hesitation, without compromise, and without worrying about how Washington might respond. To understand their excitement, you have to understand the scale of the threat they believe they're facing. South Africa's poultry industry is one of the country's largest agricultural employers. It feeds millions, supports thousands of small producers, and anchors entire rural economies. But every time cheap subsidized U.S. chicken enters the market, local farmers say it hits them like a hammer. They lose contracts because importers choose cheaper American chicken. They cut staff because they can't match the price. Feed suppliers and transporters suffer because production slows down. And in the worst cases, producers shut down completely. For farmers, this isn't a theoretical policy debate. It's survival. That's why, over the years, they've repeatedly pleaded with the government for decisive action: raise duties higher, restrict imports further, or finally impose the ban they believe is necessary to level the playing field. So when the 2025 rumor caught fire, even without official confirmation, it wasn't just news for them. It felt like validation. It felt like justice. It felt like proof that the state was finally ready to protect them aggressively. Many farmers didn't even care whether the rumor was technically accurate. They cared about what it implied, that U.S. chicken was being pushed back, and local producers were finally being prioritized. Their desperation added to the momentum. For years, farmers had warned that if South Africa didn't control U.S. imports, the domestic poultry industry could collapse. They argued that relying on foreign chicken was dangerous for national food security, because if global supply chains broke, the country would have no local capacity left. So the rumor wasn't just good news, It represented the country turning away from dependency towards self-sufficiency. But there was another reason farmers wanted the rumor to be true: frustration with the system. They've watched negotiations with the U.S. repeat like a cycle. Duties go up, duties go down. U.S. exporters complain, South Africa adjusts, health bans come and go, quotas shift. Nothing ever ends. Nothing ever resolves permanently. The dispute drags on year after year without a decisive conclusion. The rumor felt like the breakthrough that negotiations never delivered. Still, celebrating a rumor didn't change the reality. South Africa had not imposed a full ban. The government continued its usual approach, balancing protection for farmers with obligations under trade agreements. And this leads to the part of the story most people overlook: the reason South Africa never announces a complete ban, no matter how much pressure farmers apply. The question is simple, but the answer reveals the heart of the entire dispute. If farmers have been demanding a full ban for years, what exactly stops the South African government from doing it? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. What stops South Africa from imposing a full, clean, decisive ban on U.S. chicken is one word: exposure. Not physical exposure, economic exposure. South Africa is deeply connected to the United States through the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, a trade framework that gives South Africa preferential access to the American market. Billions of rands in exports, cars, citrus, wine, metals, and manufactured goods move into the U.S. under AGOA. If South Africa suddenly bans American poultry outright, it risks triggering political retaliation, the loss of benefits, or a renegotiation of terms that could hurt far more than the chicken industry helps. This is the quiet, complicated reality farmers hate. The poultry fight is not happening in isolation. It's happening inside a larger diplomatic and economic relationship that South Africa cannot afford to destabilize. So instead of banning U.S. chicken by name, South Africa uses legal, technical, and sanitary tools that restrict imports while staying within the boundaries of international trade rules. That's why the government leans on three main strategies. Anti-dumping duties. These are legally supported measures. They're not politically explosive. South Africa can raise duties without violating AGOA, and it often does. Duties make U.S. chicken more expensive, reducing its appeal without banning it outright. Import quotas and allocation limits. Quotas control volumes quietly. They don't make headlines. They don't spark diplomatic crises. But they drastically shape how much U.S. poultry enters the market. Sanitary and phytosanitary rules, SPS. This is where things become extremely sensitive. Avian influenza outbreaks in the United States allow South Africa to temporarily suspend imports from affected states. These bans are legitimate and internationally recognized. They protect public health. And they offer South Africa an opportunity to slow imports without political backlash. In other words, what farmers want, a firm, public, loud ban, is exactly what the government avoids because it comes with diplomatic consequences. And what the government prefers, quiet restrictions layered across duties, quotas, and health rules, is exactly what creates confusion among the public when rumors surface. This balancing act has defined the poultry dispute for years. South Africa tries to protect local producers while avoiding a confrontation with the U.S. The U.S. tries to push its poultry into the market while avoiding any escalation that might jeopardize its broader trade interests. This is why the dispute keeps resurfacing, but never explodes into a final, decisive resolution. But here's the critical point most people miss. The dispute doesn't die because both sides need something completely different. The U.S. needs markets for its cheap, dark meat chicken. South Africa needs to defend a domestic industry under pressure. The policies clash. The interests clash. And every few years, the problem returns to the surface. So the real question becomes, if both countries need opposite things, is there any way this conflict can ever stabilize, or is it designed to repeat itself forever? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. This conflict is designed to repeat itself. not because officials enjoy it and not because farmers want chaos, but because the fundamental incentives on each side never change. The United States and South Africa are structured in a way that guarantees this fight will always come back, even if it cools down temporarily. Start with the U.S. side. The American poultry industry produces massive quantities of dark meat chicken, which Americans don't consume as much of. These cuts pile up. Exporting them becomes the most profitable way to clear inventory. Africa, especially South Africa, is an attractive destination because of its demand, population size, and existing trade channels. U.S. exporters must find markets abroad. If South Africa closes its doors even a little, American producers feel the pressure instantly. Now look at South Africa. The domestic poultry industry is one of the country's largest agricultural employers. It includes major companies, small family farms, feed producers, transporters, distributors, and thousands of workers, all interconnected. When cheap U.S. chicken enters the market, the entire chain feels the shock. Local prices fall, margins collapse, producers scale down or shut down, unemployment rises, the government faces political backlash. So you end up with a permanent clash of needs. The U.S. must export, South Africa must protect, and because both sides are acting rationally for their own interests, the conflict never reaches a final resolution. It simply goes into cycles of escalation, negotiation, temporary calm, and new flare-ups. This cycle becomes even more intense when avian influenza appears in the U.S. South Africa applies strict sanitary rules that immediately block poultry from affected states. These are legitimate public health measures, but they hit U.S. exporters hard. And when health restrictions overlap with existing trade duties, the impact feels like a ban even though no official ban exists. This confusion feeds public narratives, and eventually, rumors like the one that exploded online in early 2025. Then there's the rising global trend of economic nationalism. African countries are increasingly rejecting cheap imports in favor of strengthening domestic production. South Africa is no exception. Its poultry industry is a symbol of sovereignty and food security. Governments across the continent are now choosing to prioritize employment, local capacity, and national self-reliance over low-cost foreign goods. Put these forces together, and the pattern becomes clear. Every few years, U.S. exporters push harder. South Africa tightens restrictions. Farmers demand more protection, and a new wave of tension rises. Which brings us to the crucial point. This isn't a conflict with an ending, it's a conflict with momentum. If the cycle is destined to continue because the underlying incentives never change, then what should South Africa expect in the next phase of this long-running battle? What exactly is likely to happen next in the South Africa-US chicken dispute as these pressures keep building? What happens next is not a surprise. It's the logical continuation of everything that has come before. The South Africa-US chicken dispute will move exactly the way it has moved for years. Forward, backward, sideways, and then right back to the start, because the underlying tensions never actually go away. They simply shift shape. The first thing to expect is that South Africa will continue tightening controls. Not through dramatic press conferences or sweeping bans, but through the same instruments that have always worked. Anti-dumping duties, quota restrictions, sanitary barriers, and state-by-state approvals tied to avian influenza. The political incentive for the government to protect local farmers is too strong, especially as economic nationalism grows across the continent. Any administration that weakens domestic poultry risks unemployment, backlash, and accusations of surrendering the food system to foreign influence. No politician wants that. On the other side, the United States will keep pushing its poultry into the global market because it must. The U.S. poultry industry doesn't have the luxury of slowing down production. It needs foreign buyers to absorb the dark meat surplus Americans don't eat. For Washington, keeping South Africa open, even partially, is a strategic priority. Losing access to the South African market creates political noise, industry pressure, and export losses. So the U.S. will fight every duty, challenge every quota, and negotiate every sanitary rule with the same intensity it always has. This combination ensures that the dispute won't settle. Instead, it will continue to flare up whenever the pressure builds. If duties rise too high, the U.S. complains import surge too much, and South Africa tightens rules. If avian flu appears in a U.S. state, sanitary bans kick in. If farmers panic, they demand a firm ban. If AGOA discussions emerge, South Africa becomes cautious again. The cycle continues. The second thing to expect is more confusion in the public narrative. As long as the government avoids blunt, definitive announcements, the public will rely on incomplete information, viral claims, and industry speculation. The 2025 rumor will not be the last. Misinterpreted customs delays, stricter inspections, or temporary suspensions will continue to generate the impression of bans, even when none exist. In a conflict this technical, perceptions rarely match policy. Third, you can expect the dispute to become more symbolic over time. As African countries increasingly resist foreign dumping and prioritize local production, the poultry fight becomes part of a larger continental identity. Choose your farmers, not foreign subsidies. South Africa's actions will be viewed through this lens as part of a broader push for economic sovereignty. So if the cycle is predictable, the confusion constant, and the political stakes are high, then the real question becomes, what is the long-term outcome? The truth is this: the chicken war will not end. Not next year, not in 5 years, not even in 10. It will adapt. It will reshape. It will calm down, then flare up again. Because neither side can afford to give the other what it wants. America cannot stop exporting, and South Africa cannot stop protecting. Which leads us to the final unresolved point of this entire story. In the next round of this conflict, which side will make the first move, and how much will it shake the market when they do? Let us know in the comment section. Should South Africa make the first move? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.